now to part 2 of this book review of Viktor E. Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl also argued that mental health is built on the tension between what a person has already achieved and what they still want to accomplish. For example, I've achieved a lot in my amateur cooking career, but I am endlessly thinking about what I want to cook next. This is frustrating and anxiety-provoking, but it certainly helps to protect my mental health because it prevents boredom and apathy. I think as autistics, our lives are very hard and we struggle a lot with sensory bombardments, constant stress. You know, the world is a very, very frustrating place to live in if you're autistic, because things that most people just put up with or take for granted to us can be torture. But autism also gives us this great ability to focus on areas of interest in great depth, and this can be a really good source of distraction and can provide some relief and relative I hesitate to use the word relaxation because I don't think I'm ever really relaxed, but it provides relative relaxation, a relative oasis of calm in what is generally a very disturbing and can be a very disturbing world that we live in. So I think special interests for autistic people are key really to helping protect our mental health, and they can prevent boredom and apathy. Now, so this tension that Frankl talks about, inherent to mental health, this tension between what a person has already achieved and what they still want to accomplish, is actually part of being human. Crucially, meaning is not to be found in life as some abstract mystical answer, or an answer that someone else can give you, that someone else can tell you about. Meaning is to be found in a choices of concrete human beings, each faced with their own challenges and problems to solve. There are different ways to find meaning. So an autistic person's meaning is just as valid as a non-autistic person. The key thing is if a person is getting a sense of well-being, a sense of gratification, a sense of challenge, if you like, from whatever path they've chosen. It doesn't matter whether that meaning is to be found through watching video games, as long as that's making a person happy and things like that, or if that sense of meaning is to be found from reading a book. As long as the person's path isn't hurting other people, crucially, and is mindful of other people and is not hurting other people, then each person should be allowed to pursue their own meaning, with that key caveat, obviously, because obviously if something hurts another person, then that's clearly damaging. Now, there are clearly different ways to find meaning. Firstly, you could create something of value, or you could act in the world. So, you know, baking a cake, that might be a creative act. You don't have to be employed in a traditional sense, because most autistic people are unemployed. You do not have to be employed in a traditional sense to find meaning in your life. There are many ways of finding meaning, many ways of finding value in the world, which is unique to each person. So yes, you could create something, like I say, you might bake a cake, you might create a poem, you might write something, that's one way of making meaning. You could do some voluntary work. You know, you could take part in, you could go and, pursue a voluntary cause that you're passionate about. Secondly, you could experience something or someone, so you might experience a work of art, you might find someone that you really like and find meaning through them. And thirdly, we can choose the attitude we take towards unavoidable suffering. So we can still find meaning even if we're suffering, as long as that suffering is unavoidable. We can have the power to transform a hard situation into accomplishment, depending on the story we choose to write about ourselves. So, you know, like I say, you could either take a woe is me approach to autism, woe is me, this is all doom and gloom, I'm just going to give up. Or you can see autism as a challenge. Autism contains many hardships, which must not be underestimated. I do believe very strongly that autism is a disability, and certainly in order to receive a diagnosis of autism, you need to be disabled in some way. But I don't think disability needs to be a stigma. Disability just means that because we're autistic, we're at a disadvantage in some way in society. And obviously there are various theories as to why this might be. Some take a social model that is mainly society. Others might find that it's a combination of society and some inherent problem. Each person ultimately gets to make a decision for themselves. But disability isn't all doom and gloom. We can either wallow in doom and gloom and see disability as, this really bad thing, or we can think, okay, so we've got this disability, can't really change that, it's a lot in life, but you know what, I'm still going to continue struggling on anyway, and I'm going to make the most of this situation, and I'm still going to try and, try as hard as I can to improve myself and things like that. So that's the choice really we have. And therefore we can still achieve things. It might not be conventional achievements, but they're still achievements nonetheless. Just getting out of the house is an achievement if you really struggle with that. So, humans as such are actually even prepared to suffer as long as that suffering is meaningful. For example, when I read my books, I suffer from stress because of the difficulty I experience of blocking out distractions. But I am prepared to endure this because reading is a meaningful hobby, despite the stress. So, I could take the approach of, okay, I'm going to give up. I'm not going to bother reading anymore because it's just so stressful. I'm finding it so hard and this is awful and I just can't cope this anymore. I could take that attitude and become really depressed by it. Or I could carry on, doing what I love, even though it's stressful and painful, because, ultimately it still carries meaning, despite the fact it's painful. So I can't change the fact I have sensory processing issues, so this is a case of unavoidable suffering here. But at the same time, I can try and make life as easy as possible for myself through wearing headphones and trying as much as possible to control my environment, because if I didn't do that, then that would basically be masochism. It would be to suffer more than I need, and that would just be absolutely absurd, and that would not be meaningful. The meaningful thing to do is to try to reduce the suffering as much as you can do, but ultimately, if you're autistic, you're always going to suffer to some extent unfortunately, in this world we live in, and I doubt there's ever a world where all our problems are going to go away. That's why I think the social model can sometimes take things a bit too far. It'd have to be some absolute utopia for us not to be disabled at all, and I don't think that utopia really exists. So to reduce distress to a minimum, but not to give up just because some suffering will still be inevitable. Frankel argues that we should avoid thinking that we're nothing but the result of biological or environmental conditions. We're not the victim of circumstances. We do have the freedom to act within a condition, so this is circumscribed freedom. It's not freedom in a vacuum. We don't have total freedom because our circumstances are still there, acting as a constraint of what we can achieve, and some people's freedom is very limited. But he argues, by environmental conditions, but he argues that even someone whose freedom is very limited, everyone, no matter how limited their freedom, they do still have a fundamental attitudinal decision to make, and that is a form of freedom. So we're not the victim of circumstance. We do have a freedom to act within a condition, and so we're not fully determined by anything. We're not machines, and this was shown most vividly in a concentration camp where some behaved like brute beasts and others exhibited extreme compassion. Frankel argues that was a choice they made, and ultimately the responsibility for that choice lay on the people who made the choice. Nothing within themselves was making them behave that way. This was a choice and a decision they made as free agents, and ultimately any guilt comes back to the person. They cannot shy away from the decisions they made. So this can be quite a painful philosophy for some people, because it really does emphasise responsibility, but at the same time, guilt can also be guilt can also encourage us to make personal growth, because if we're guilty, if one of our decisions in the past has made us feel guilty, we can't ever undo what we did in the past, but we can still try and ensure we don't behave like that again in the future. Now, I enjoyed reading this book, and I'm not sure, I do take the approach of kind of, how can I put it, I guess a sort of middle ground approach really. I do think that there are many factors that often curtail how a person can act. I do nonetheless believe we do still have some freedom, but possibly not to the extent that Frankel says we do. I'm not sure about that, I'd have to think about it. I do recommend this book if you like to read a psychological account of how to find meaning in life. I would also like to find out more about logotherapy, which I think would be very helpful. So, what do you think about the arguments raised in this book? Do you think we are as free as Frankel suggests, or is it the case that we can't always choose our attitude? Perhaps because of biological, brain-based factors beyond our control? One of my concerns is that by overstressing a personal responsibility to form our attitudes, we could fall prey to victim blaming, those who can't find redemption in their suffering. So could the case for freedom be taken too far? certainly some people, might take the attitude that all is doom and gloom and get all sunk into apathy, but are they really 100% free in making that decision? What if their brains are just neurologically geared for them to take that pessimistic approach? You know, maybe they've got a different, maybe their neurotransmitters are, maybe they've got a serotonin imbalance or something, you know, that might not be in their control. So maybe it could be argued that this case for freedom goes a bit too far. But again, even for someone who in that situation could still be, through therapy, could still maybe learn how to shift their attitude, so there still may be redemption even in cases where it looks as though the person is completely determined. I mean, I don't think anyone's ever completely determined. I'm just not quite sure to what extent the freedom is as absolute as Frankl presumes. But it's certainly something worth thinking about anyway, which is why this sort of philosophical book definitely got me thinking. So anyway, so that's it for now. And I very much look forward to speaking to you again next week. I don't know what I'm going to be talking about next week. Maybe a few recipes, who knows. I know there's a few more viewer questions I need to answer at some point. I think there's one about my fear of dogs. I'll try and answer them when I can. It might not be next week, but I haven't forgotten about them. And if you do have any other questions that you'd like to ask me, do let me know and I'll try and answer them. I will answer them at some point. I can't give you an exact date as to when, but I haven't forgotten about them and I will try and answer them as soon as possible. So thank you for watching.